Hello everyone, I'm going to read you Book 10, The School Russian Roulette, Alex Rider book. Chapter 6, Kursk. I entered Kursk on legs that were tired and feet that were sore, and remembered that the last time I had been there, it had been on a school trip to the museum. Lenin had once visited the Kursk. The great Soviet leader had stopped briefly in the town on his way somewhere more important, because there was a problem with his train. He made a short speech on the station platform and then went to the local cafe for a cup of tea, and happening to glance in the mirror and find that his beard and moustache needed a trim. Not surprisingly, the local barber almost had a heart attack when the most powerful man in the Soviet Union walked into his shops. The cup that he drank and the clippings of black hair were still on display in the History and Folklore Museum of Kursk. It was a large reddish-brown building with rooms that were filled with objects, and after only an hour, my head had already been pounding. From the outside, it looked like a railway station. Curiously, Kursk railway stations looked quite like a museum, with wide stairs, pillars, and huge bronze doors that should have opened onto something more important than ticket offices, platforms, and waiting rooms. I had seen it on that last trip, but I couldn't remember where it was. When you've been taken to a place in a coach and marched round shoulder to shoulder in a long line with no talking allowed, you don't really look where you're going. That hadn't been my only visit. My father had taken me to the cinema here once, and then there had been my visit to the hospital. But all these places could have been on different planets, and I had no idea where they were related to one another. After Estrov, the place felt enormous. I had forgotten how many buildings there were, how many shops, and how many cars and buses racing up and down the wide cobbled streets. Everywhere seemed to have electricity. There were wires zigzagging from pole to pole, crossing each other like a disastrous cat's cradle. But I'm not suggesting that Kursk was anything special. I'd spent my whole life in a tiny village, so I was easily impressed. I didn't notice the crumbling plaster on the buildings, the empty construction sites, the pits in the road, and dirty water running through the gutters. The late afternoon when I arrived, and the light was already falling. My mother said that there were 2 trains a day to Moscow, and I hoped I was in time to catch the evening one. I never spent a night in the hotel before, even though I had money in my pocket. The idea of finding one booking a room filled me with fear. How much would I have to pay? Would they even give me a room to a boy on his own? I have been walking non-stop, leaving the forest behind me out just after midday. I was starving, hungry, since I had left the shed. All I had to eat was the lingonberries I collected. I still had a handful of them in my pocket, but I couldn't eat any more because they were giving me stomach cramps. My feet were aching, soaking wet. I was wearing my leather boots, which had suddenly decided to leak. I felt filthy and wondered if they would let me onto the train. What if they wouldn't? I had only one plan: to get to Moscow. And even that seemed daunting. I had seen pictures of that city at school, of course, but I had no real idea what it would be like. Finding the station wasn't so difficult in the end. Somehow I stumbled across the centre of the town. Suppose every road led you there if you walked enough. It was a spacious area with an empty fountain and a Second World War monument, a slab of granite shaped like a slice of cake, with the inscription, "We salute the glorious dead of Kursk." I had always been brought up to respect all those who had lost their lives in the war, but I know that there was nothing glorious about being dead. The monument was surrounded by statues of generals and soldiers, many of them on horseback. It was there how they set off to face the German tanks. The station was right in front of me, and the end of the wide, very straight boulevard with trees on both sides. I recognized it at once. It was surrounded by stalls selling everything from suitcases blankets and cushions to all sorts of food and drink. I could smell shashlik, skewers of meat cooking on charcoal fires, and it made my mouth water. I was desperate to buy something, but that was when I realised I had a problem. Though I had a lot of money in my pocket, it was all in the large notes. I had no coins. If I was handed a 10-ruble note for a snack, that would cost no more than a few kopecks. I wouldn't draw attention to myself. The stallholder would assume I was a thief. Better to wait until I'd bought my train ticket. At least then I would have change. With these thoughts in my mind, I walked towards the main entrance of the station. I was so relieved to have got here and so anxious to be on my way. I was careless. I was keeping my head down, trying not to catch anyone's eye. I should have been looking all around me. In fact, if I had been sensible, I have tried the end of the station from a completely different direction, from the side or the back. And it was, I hadn't taken more than 5 or 6 steps before I found that my way was blocked. I glanced up and saw 2 policemen standing in front of me, dressed in a long grey coat with the insignia on the collars and military caps. They were both young, in their 20s. They had revolvers hanging from their belts. "Where are you going?" one of them asked. He had bad skin. There he was, as if he only started shaving recently and had used a blunt razor. "To the station," I pointed, trying to sound casual. "Why? I work there after school. I help clean the platforms and make things up as I went along." "Where are you come from?" "Over there. Put in one of the apartment blocks. Passing my way to the town." "Your name?" "Leo Treyakov, my poor dead friend." When I had chosen him, 2 policemen hesitated for a moment, thought they were going to let me pass. Surely there was no reason to stop me. Just a boy doing odd jobs after school. But then the second policeman spoke. "Your identity papers?" he demanded. His eyes were cold. I had used a false name because I was afraid the authorities would know who I was. After all, it had been my parents, Anton and Eva Grigorovich, who had escaped from the factory, but now I was trapped. The moment they looked at my passport, they would have known I lied to them. I should have been watching out for them from the start. Now that I looked around me, I realized that the station was crawling with policemen. Obviously, the police would know what happened at Estrov. They'd been told that 2 boys had escaped. They'd been warned to keep an eye out for us at every station in the area, and I had simply walked into their arms. "I don't have them," I put a stupid look on my face, and as if I didn't realize how serious it was to be without an ID. At home, it must have worked. I was only 14 and looked young for my age. Maybe the policeman had been given my description. Maybe one of the helicopter pilots had managed to take my photograph as he flew overhead. And the way they knew I could see it in their eyes. The way they glanced at each other. They only started their careers. This was a huge moment for them. It could lead to a promotion, a pay rise. Their names in the newspaper. They had just scored big time. They had me. "You would come with us," the first policeman said. "Done nothing wrong. My mother will be worried." Why was I even bothering? Neither of them believed me. "No arguments," the second man snapped. I had no choice. If I argued, I tried to run. They'd grab me and call for backup. I would be bundled into a police van before I could blink. It was better for the moment to stick with them. If they were determined to bring me into the police station themselves, they might still have an opportunity for me to get away. The building could be on the other side of the town, but going with them I would at least buy myself a little time to plan a way out of this. He walked slowly, and all the time I was thinking, when I was darting around, adding up to the possibilities. There was plenty of people around. The working day coming to an end, and they were on their way home. They wouldn't help me. They wouldn't want to get involved. I glanced back at the 2 policemen who were walking about 2 steps behind me. What was it that I had noticed about them? They had clearly been pleased that they had caught me. No question of that. But at the same time, they were nervous. Well, that was understandable. This was a big day for them. Something else. They were nervous for another reason. I saw it now. They were walking very carefully, close enough to grab me if I tried to escape, but not so close that they would actually touch me. Why the distance between me? Then why hadn't they put handcuffs on me? Why were they giving me the even smallest chance to run away? It made no sense, unless they knew. That was it. I had to be. I had supposedly been infected with the virus, So today they had forced the authorities to wipe out my village. They had killed Leo in less than 24 hours. Soldiers in the forest had all dressed in biochemical protective gear. The police in Kursk and in Rosnov, for that matter, must have been told that I was dangerous, infected. No one could have guessed that my parents had risked everything to insulate me. They probably didn't know that an antidote existed at all. There was nothing to protect the young officers who had arrested me. As far as they were concerned, I was a walking time bomb. They wanted to bring me in, but they weren't going to come too close. We continued walking away from the station. A few people passed us, but said nothing. I looked the other way. The policeman was still hanging back, and now I knew why. Although it didn't look like I had the upper hand, they were afraid of me. I could just use that. Casually, I slipped my hand into my pocket. Two men were behind me. They didn't see the movement. I took it out and wiped my mouth. Since they were drawing close to the police station from the police cars parked ahead. "Down there!" one of the policemen snapped. We were going to enter the police station the back way, down a wide alley and across a deserted car park with overflowing dustbins lined up along a rusting fence. We turned off and suddenly we were on our own. It was exactly what I wanted. I stumbled slightly and let out a groan, clutching hold of my stomach. Neither of the policemen spoke. I stopped. One of them prodded me in the back. Just one finger, no contact with my skin. "Keep moving," he commanded. "I can't," I said, putting as much pain as I could imagine into my voice. Twisted around at the same time, I began to cough, making horrible, wretched noises, as if my lungs were tearing themselves apart. Sucked in, gasping for air, still holding my stomach. Policeman stared at me in horror. There was bright blood all around my lips, trickling down my chin. I coughed again, drops of blood splattered in their direction. I watched them fall back as if they had come to face with a poisoned snake. And as far as they knew, my blood was poison. If any of them had touched them, they would end up like me. But it wasn't blood. Just a minute ago, I slipped some of the lingam berries from the forest in my mouth and chewed them up. I was spitting was red berry juice mixed with my own saliva. "Please help me," I said. I'm not well. I'm not well." The two policemen had come to a dead halt, caught between the two conflicting desires. One to hold on to me, the other to be as far from me as possible. I was overacting like crazy, grimacing, straggling about like a drunk. Really didn't matter. Just as I suspected, they'd been told how dangerous I would. They knew the stakes. Their imagination was doing half the work for them. Everyone died. They all died. Please, I don't want to be like them. I reached out, imploring. My hand was stained red. The two men stepped back. They weren't coming anywhere near. So much pain, I sobbed. I fell to my knees. The juice dripped onto my jacket. The policeman made the decision. If they stayed where they were, if they tried to force me to fight, it would kill them quickly and pleasantly. Yes, they would. Yes, they wanted their promotion, but their lives mattered more. Maybe a cure to them. That their very fact that they'd come close meant that they themselves would have to be eliminated. As far as they could see, I was dying anyway. I was lying on my side now, writhing on the ground, sobbing. My whole face was covered in blood. One of them spoke briefly to the other. I didn't hear what he said, but his colleagues must have agreed because a moment later they had gone home back the way they had come. I watched them turn the corner. I much doubted that they would report what had just happened. Or their dereliction of duty would not be something that they would wish to advertise. They would probably spend the rest of the day at the bathhouse, hoping that steam and hot water would wash away the disease. I waited until I saw they were gone, then got to my feet and wiped my face with my sleeve. These things counted on giving me an advance walking. There's no way I was going to walk into the railway station at Kursk. The moment I tried to buy a train ticket, there would be someone there to arrest me, and I very much doubted the same trick would work a second time. If I was going to get onto a train to Moscow, I was going to have to think of something else. And already I had an idea. There were quite a few passengers arriving in taxis, coming off buses just before I had been arrested, and I suggested that the evening train might be coming soon. At the same time, I'd seen a number of porters who could afford to help them with their luggage. Some of them had been boys dressed in loose-fitting jackets, with red piping down the sleeves. I don't think they would employ officers. Just try to make a few kopecks on the side. I made my way back towards the station. I saw myself behind the trees, close to the buildings, keeping an eye out for any policemen mingling with the crowd. Soon found out what I was looking for. One of the porters was sitting outside a cafe, smoking a cigarette. He was about my age, even if he was trying to disguise it with a beard and a moustache. They were both made of that horribly wispy hair. It doesn't really belong to one on the face. His jacket was hanging open. His cap sat crooked on his head. I singled up next to him and sat down. After a while, he noticed me and nodded in my direction without smiling. It was enough. "When's the next train to Moscow?" I asked. He answered his watch. 20 minutes. Pretending to consider this place of information. "How would you like to make 5 rubles?" I asked. His eyes narrowed. 5 hours was probably as much as he earned in a week. "I'll be honest with you, friend," I said. "I'm in trouble now with the policeman. I was almost arrested just now. I need to get on that train, and if you'll send me your jacket and your cap, I'll give you the cash." Not such a big grumble. Somehow I knew that this boy would be greeted. And anyway, most people in Russia would help you if you were trying to get away from the authorities. That was how you were. "Why do the police want you?" he asked. "I'm a thief." He sucked lazily on his cigarette. "I'll give you my jacket and my cap," he said, "but it'll cost you 10 rubles. Agreed." Took out the money, taking care not to show him how much I had. I handed over a single note. Tonight this porter would drink himself into a stupor. He might invite his friends to join him. He handed me his coat and his cap, but I did not go straight into the station. I stopped at one of the stores and used another 4 rubles to buy a pair of second-hand suitcases from an old man who had a whole pile of them. Quickly I took off my outer clothes and slipped them into one of the cases. I put on the jacket and cap. Then, carrying the suitcases, I made my way to the station. It seemed now that the police were everywhere. Was it possible that one had arrested me had talked after all? They had thrown a ring around the entire building. They were in front of the ticket office on the platform, but none of them noticed me. I waited until a smart-looking couple, some sort of local government and his wife, got out of a taxi and followed them into the station. They did not look round, but to the police and to everyone else you can swear, they really looked as if they had hired a porter. The 2 almost empty cases I was carrying was theirs. I timed it perfectly. When no sooner arrived at the platform than a train drew in, the evening train to Moscow. One of my clients to the carriage and climbed in behind them. They were completely unaware of my presence, and although I was out of there in plain sight, nobody challenged me. This is something that has not changed to this day. People look at the clothes you're wearing without even thinking of the person who's inside. A man with a back-to-front collar is a vicar. A woman with a white coat with a stethoscope around her neck is a doctor. And it's simply as that. You do not ask them for their ID. I stayed on the train, and a few minutes later, it left, very quickly picking up speed, carrying me into the darkness. I knew I would never return. Chapter 7. Mokba. Moscow. Kansatsky Station. Moscow. It's hard to remember my feelings as the train drew near to its final destination. On the other one hand, I was elated. I had made it. I travelled 600 miles, leaving the police and all my other problems behind me. What of this new world in which I was about to find myself? The train would stop, the doors would open, and what then? Through the windows I had already seen apartment blocks, one after another. That must have been home to tens of thousands of people. How could they live like that? So many of them piled up on top of each other. Then there were the churches and their golden domes 10 times the size of poor St. Nicholas. The factories billowing smoke into a sky that was cloudless, sunless, a single sheet of grey. But all of these were dwarfed by skyscrapers, with their spires and glinting needles, thousands of windows, millions of brick rising up as if from some crazy dream. Of course it had been shown in pictures of them at school. I knew they were built by Stalin back in the 1940s and 50s, but seeing them for myself was different. Somehow shocked that they did actually exist, that they were really here, scattered around the city, or watching over it. I had been fortunate on the train. There was an empty compartment right at the back with a bunk bed that folded down. That was where I slept. Not on the bunk, but underneath it, on the floor. Out of sight of the ticket collectors. The strange thing was I managed to sleep at all. I managed to sleep at all. I suppose I was exhausted. I woke up once or twice in the night to listen to the train rumbling through the darkness. And I could feel that my memory was slipping away. Eshrov, Leo, my parents, my school. I knew that by the time I arrived in Moscow, I would be a little more empty than an empty shell. 14-year-old boy with no past and perhaps no future. That was even a small part of me. How I wished I hadn't escaped from the police. At least that way I wouldn't have I wouldn't have to make any decisions. I wouldn't be on my own. One name stayed with me, turning over and over in my head. Misha Dementiev. He worked in the biology department of Moscow State University. And my mother had insisted that he would look after me. Surely it would be it wouldn't be so hard to find him. The worst of my troubles might already be over. That was what I tried to tell myself. The station was jammed. I had never seen so many people in one place. As I stepped down from the train and found myself on a platform that seemed to stretch on forever, with passengers milling about everywhere, carrying suitcases, packages, bundles of clothes, some of them chewing on sandwiches, others emptying their hip flasks. Everyone was tired and grimy. There were policemen too, but I didn't think that they were looking. They didn't think they were looking for me. I had taken off the porter's cap and jacket and abandoned the suitcases. Once again, I was in my young pioneer's outfit. Although I thought of getting rid of that too, it was quite warm in Moscow. The air felt heavy and smelled of oil and smoke. I allowed myself to be swept along, following the crowd, through a vast ticket hall, larger than any room I had ever seen, and out into the street. I found myself standing on the edge of a square. Again, it was the side that struck me first. To my eyes, this single place was as big as the whole of Kursk. There were lanes of traffic, and cars, buses, trams, rolling past in every direction. The very notion of a traffic jam was a new experience for me, and I was overwhelmed by the noise and stench of the exhaust fumes. Even today, it sometimes surprised me that people are willing to put up with it. The cars were even colour imaginable. I had seen official chaikas and ladders, but it was as if these vehicles had driven here from every country in the world. Grey taxis with chessboard patterns on their hoods dodged in and out of the different lines. Just as well, for pedestrians, which was just as well, trying to cross on the surface. Subways have been built for pedestrians. Subways have been built for pedestrians. Subways have been built for pedestrians, which was just as well. Trying to cross on the surface would have been suicide. There were 3 separate railway stations in the square, each one trying to outdo the other with soaring pillars, archways and towers. Travellers were arriving from different parts of Russia, and as soon as they emerged, they were greeted by all sorts of food stalls, mainly run by wrinkled old women in white aprons and hats. In fact, people were selling everything: meat, vegetables, Chinese jeans and padded jackets, electrical goods, their own furniture. Some of them must have come off the train for no other reason. Nobody had any money. This was where you had to start. My own needs were simple and immediate. I was dizzy with hunger. I ate to the nearest fruit stall and started with a small pie filled with cabbage and meat. I followed it with a currant bun, which we used to call them calorikas, and they were specially made to fill you up. Then I bought a drink from a machine, and I squirted syrup and fizzy water into a glass. It still wasn't enough. I had another, and then a raspberry ice cream. Then I bought for 7 kopecks. The lady beamed at me as she handed it over, as if she knew that it was something special. I remember the taste of this to this day. I was it was as if I had finished the last spoonful that I realised I was being watched. There was a boy of about 17 or 18 leaning against a lamppost examining me. He was the same height as me, but more thickly set with muddy eyes, long grey straight, almost colourless hair. He would have been handsome, but At some time his nose had been broken and unevenly, giving his whole face an unnatural slant. He was wearing a black leather jacket, which was much too big for him. The sleeves rolled back so that he wouldn't cover his hands. Perhaps he had stolen it. Nobody was coming anywhere near him. Even the travellers seemed to avoid him. From where he was standing there, you would think he owned the pavement and perhaps the half the city. Quite like that. The way he had gazed, he had nothing pretended otherwise. As I gazed around me, I realised that there were quite a lot of children outside Kansan station, most of them huddling together in groups close to the entrance without darning to go inside. These children looked much less than well off than the boy in the leather jacket, emaciated with pale skin and hollow eyes. Some of them were trying to beg from the arriving passengers, though they were doing it half-heartedly, as if they were nervous of being seen. I saw a couple of tiny boys, who couldn't have been more than 10 years old, homeless and half-starved. I felt ashamed. What would they have been thinking as they watched me gorge myself? I was tempted to go over and give them a few kopecks. Suddenly, before I could move, the older boy suddenly walked forward and stood in front of me. There was something about his manner that unnerved me. He seemed to be smiling at some pirate joke. He knew who I was, where I'd come from. I got a feeling that he knew everything about me, even though we had never met. "Hello, soldier," he said. He was referring, of course, to my young pioneer's outfit. "Where have you come from?" "From Kursk." "From Kursk," I said. "Never heard of it. Nice place?" "It's all right. First time in Moscow." "First time in Moscow?" "No, I've been here before." He knew straight away that I was like the policeman in Kursk, but he was just smiling in his own way. You got somewhere to say. I have a friend. It's good to have a friend. We all need friends. You could not scared, but I don't see anyone. It's not here. It reminded me of my first day at senior school. Trying to sound confident, but I was completely defenseless, and he knew it. He examined me more closely, weighing up various possibilities. Then suddenly he straightened up and stretched out a hand. "Relax, soldier," he said. "I don't want to give you any hassle. I'm Dimitri. You can call me Dimmer. I took his hand. I couldn't really refuse it. "I'm Yasha," he said. I said. We shook. "Welcome to Moscow," he said. "Welcome back, I should say." "Welcome back, I should say. So where were you last year?" "It was a while ago," I said. I knew that the more I spoke, the more I would give away. "It was with my parents," I added. "This time you were on your own?" Yes. The single word hung in the air. It was hard to make out what Dimmer had in mind. On the one hand, he seemed friendly enough, but on the other, I could sense him unravelling me. It was that broken nose of his made me difficult to read his face. "This person I'm supposed to be meeting," I said. "He's a friend of my parents. He works at the University of Moscow. Don't suppose you know how to get there?" "The university? It's a long way from this part of the town, but it's quite easy. You can take the metro." His hand slipped over my shoulder. Before I knew it, we were walking together. "The entrance is over here. There's a direct line that runs all the way there. The station you want is called Universitet. Do you have any money?" "Not much," I said. "Doesn't matter. The metro is cheap. In fact, I'll tell you what." He reached out and a coin appeared in his fingertips. So he had plucked it out of the air. "Here's 5 kopecks. It's all you need, and don't worry about paying me back. Always happy to help someone new to town." We had arrived at a staircase leading underground, and to my surprise, he began to walk down with me. Was he going to come the whole way? His hand was still on my shoulder, and as we went, he was telling me about a journey. 9 stops, maybe 10. Just stay on the train and you'll be there in no time." As he spoke, a set of swing doors opened in front of us, and 2 more boys appeared, coming in up the steps. They were the same age as Dimmer, one dark, the other fair. I expected them to move aside, but they didn't. They barged into me, and for a moment I was sandwiched between them, with Dimmer still behind me. I thought they were going to attack me, but they were gone as suddenly as they arrived. "Watch out! Watch out!" Dimmer shouted. He twisted around and called out after them. "Why don't you look where you're going?" He turned back to me. "That's how people are in the city, always in a hurry, and to hell with everyone else." The boys had gone, and we said no more about it. Dimmer took me as far as the barriers. "Good luck, soldier," he said. "Hope you find who you're looking for." He shook hands again. "Remember, Universitet. With a cheerful wave, he ambled away, leaving me on my own. I walked forward and stopped in front of the escalator. I had never seen anything like it. Stairs that moved, that carried people up and down in an endless stream. That seemed to go on and on, and I couldn't believe that railway lines had been laid so deep. Cautiously I stepped onto them and found myself clinging onto the handrail, being carried down as if into the bowels of the earth. At the very bottom there was a uniformed woman in a glass box. Her job was to simply watch the passengers, to make sure that nobody tripped over and hurt themselves. I couldn't imagine what it must be like to work here all day, buried underground, never seeing the sun. The Moscow metro was famous all over Russia. It had been built by workers from every part of the country. Famous artists that had been brought in to decorate it. Each station was spectacular in its own way. This one had gold-coloured pillars in mosaic floors and glass spheres hanging from the ceiling, blazed with light to the thousands of passengers who used it. It was nothing, simply a way of getting around, but I was amazed. A train came roaring out of the tunnel almost immediately. I got on, and a moment later the doors slammed shut. With a jolt, the train moved on. I took a spare seat, and it was as I sat down that I knew that something was wrong. I reached back and patted my trouser pocket. It was empty. I had been robbed. All my money had gone apart from a few coins. I played back what had happened there and suddenly realized I was set up from the start. Dim had been seeing me paying for the food. He knew I had cash. Somehow he must have been signalled to the other two other boys and sent them into the station through another entrance. He'd kept me talking just long enough, and then he led me down the steps and straight into their arms. It was a professional job, and one they had probably done 100 times before. My anger was as black as the tunnel we plunged into. I'd lost more than 70 rubles. My parents had saved the money. They had thought it would save me, but I had stupidly, blindly allowed it to be taken away from me. What a fool I was. I didn't deserve to survive, but sitting there, being swept along beneath the city, I decided that perhaps it didn't matter after all. Even as the train was carrying me forward, I could put it all behind me. I was going to meet Mr. Dementia, and he would look after me. I didn't actually need the money anymore. Looking back now, I would say this is one of the first valuable lessons I learned, and one that would be useful in my future line of work. Sometimes things go wrong. It is inevitable. It is a mistake to waste time and energy worrying about the events that you cannot influence. Once they'd happened, let them go. What was I expecting the university to be like? In my mind, I had seen a single building like my school, only bigger, but instead when I came out of the station, I found a city within the city, an entire neighbourhood devoted to learning. It was much more spacious and elegant than anything I had seen so far in Moscow. There were boulevards and parks, special buses to carry the students in and out, lawns and fountains, and not one building, but dozens of them, evenly spaced, each one in its own domain. It was all dominated by one of the Stalin skyscrapers, and as I stood in front of it, I say how it had been designed to make you feel tiny. It to remind you of the power and the majesty of the state. Standing in front of the steps that led to the front doors, hidden behind a row of columns, I felt like the world's worst sinner about to enter a church, but at the same time the building had a magnetic attraction. No idea where the biology department was, but this was the heart of the university. I would find Mr. Dementia here. I climbed the steps and went in. The inside of the building didn't seem to fit what I had seen outside. It was like stepping into a submarine or a ship with no windows, no views, and the ceilings were low. It was too warm. Corridors led to more doors. The doors opened onto other doors. Staircases sprouted in every direction. Students marched past me on all sides, carrying their books and their backpacks. And I forced myself to keep moving, knowing that if I stopped and looked lost, it would be a sure way to get noticed. It seemed to me that if there was an administrative area and office with names of all the people working at the university, sure it would be someone close to the entrance. Surely the university wouldn't want casual visitors to plunge too far into the building. Or to take one of the lifts up to the 40th or 50th floor. Tried the door, it was locked. Next one opened into a toilet. Next to it there was a bare room occupied by a cleaner with a mop and a cigarette. What do you want? She asked. The administration's office. She looked at me balefully. That way on the left, room 1117. The corridor went on for about 100 meters, but the door marked 1117 was only halfway down. I knocked and went in. There were two more women sitting at desks which were far too small for the typewriters. Piles of paper, fastened ashtrays that covered them. One of the women was plugged into an old-fashioned telephone system with sort of wires looping in everywhere. But she glanced up as I came in. Yes, she demanded. Can you help me? I asked. I'm looking for someone. You need the student office. That's room 1301. I'm not looking for a student. I need to speak to a professor. His name is Mr. Dementia. Room 2425, the 24th floor. Take the lift at the end of the corridor. I heard a surge of relief. He was here. He was in his office. At that moment I saw the end of my journey. Started a new life. This man knew my parents. Now he would help me. Took the lift to the 24th floor, sharing it with different groups of students who were looked silly, grubby and dishevelled. It had been a lift before, and its old-fashioned seal box would shut in and stopped at least a dozen times, which had none of the wonders of the escalator on the metro. Finally arrived at the floor I wanted, stepped out, followed a cream corridor like the ground floor that had no windows. At least the offices were clearly labelled. Found the one I wanted to the right corner. The door was open and I approached a man speaking on the telephone. Here's the course, Mr. Kursk, he was saying. Yes, sir, thank you, sir. Knocked on the door. Come in. I entered a small cluttered room with a single square window looking out of the main avenue, and the steps that had first brought me here into the building. There must have been 500 or 600 books there, not just lined up along the shelves, but stacked up on the floor and every available surface. They were fighting for space with a whole range of laboratory equipment. Different sized flasks, 2 microscopes, scales, Bunsen burners, boxes that looked like miniature ovens, all fridges, with an oven of all a complete human skeleton stood in a frame on one corner, as if it were here to guard all the paraphernalia. While its owner was away, the man was sitting at his desk. He had a first impression down as thought came in. And the first impression was that he was about the same age as my father, with thick black hair that only emphasized the round black patch in the middle of his head. The skin was stretched tight and polished, reflecting in the ceiling light. He had a heavy beard and moustache, and as he examined me from a pair of glasses, I saw small anxious eyes blinking at me, as if I'd never seen a boy before. I was certainly never allowed one into his office. Actually, I was wrong about this. He spoke my name immediately. Yasha? Yasha? Are you Mr. Dementia? I asked. Professor Dementia, he replied. Please come in. Close the door. Does anyone know you're here? I asked in the administration room downstairs. I said, you spoke to Anna. I had no idea what the woman's name was. He didn't let me reply. It's a great pity. It would have been much better if you had telephoned me before you came. How did you get here? I came by train. I know what has happened in Eshrov. He was agitated. So there were beads of sweat on his crown of his head. I saw him glistening. You cannot stay here, Yasha. It is too dangerous. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My parents said you'd look after me, and I will. Of course I will. He smiled at me, but he was full of nervous energy. He was allowing this different thought process to tumble over each other. Sit down, Yasha, please. He went into a chair. Sorry, but you've taken me completely by surprise. Are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Can I get you something? Before I would answer, he snatched up the telephone again. There's somebody I know, he explained to me. He's a friend. He can help you. I'm going to ask him to come. He dialed a number, and as I sat down facing him uncomfortably close to the skeleton, he spoke quickly into the receiver. It's Dementia. The boy is here. Yes, here at the university. He paused while the person at the other end spoke to him. We haven't had a chance to speak yet. I thought I should let you know at once. He was answering a question I hadn't heard. Seems all right, unharmed. Yes, we'll wait for you here. He put the phone down and it seemed to me that he was actually less agitated than he had been when I had arrived, as if he had done what he was unexpected of him. For some reason, I was feeling uneasy. By the look of it, Professor Dementia wasn't pleased to see me. I was a danger to him. This was my parents, my closest friend, but I was beginning to wonder how much that friendship was worth. How did you know who I was? I asked. I've been expecting you ever since I heard what about happened. I recognized you, Yasha. You look very much like your mother. I saw the two of you together a few times when you were very young. You won't remember me. It was before your parents left Moscow. Why did they leave? What happened? You worked with them? Worked with your father? Yes. Did you know that he's dead? I didn't know for certain. I didn't know for certain. I'm sorry to hear it. He and I were friends. So tell me, are you sure I can't get you something? I had eaten and drunk everything I needed at Kanzansky station. What I really wanted to be is away from here. I had to say that I was disappointed by Mr. Dementia. I'm not sure what I've been expecting, but maybe he could have been more affectionate, like a long-lost uncle or something. He hadn't even come out from behind his desk. What happened? I asked again. Well, I was my father sent to work in Estrov. I can't go through all that now. He was flustered again. Later, please, Professor Dementia. All right, all right. He looked at me as if he was wondering if he could trust me. Then he began. Your father was a genius. He and I worked here together in this department. We were young. You could trust me. Then he began. Your father was a genius, and he and I worked here together. We were young students, idealists, excited. We were researching in the spores, and one particular anthrax. I don't know. I suppose you know very much about that. I know about the anthrax, I said. We thought we could change the world. Your father especially. He was looking at ways to prevent the infection of sheep and cattle. There was an accident. Working in a laboratory together, we created a form of anthrax that was much faster and deadlier than anything anyone has ever known. It had no cure. Antibiotics were useless against it. It was a weapon. That wasn't our intention. That's what we wanted. But yes, it was the perfect biological weapon. And of course, the government found out about it. Everything that happened in this place, they know about. It was true then. It was true now. They heard about our work here. They came to us and ordered us development in it for military use. Dementia took out a handkerchief and used it to polish the lenses of his glasses. Put them back on. Your father refused. It was the last thing he wanted. They started to put the pressure on. They threatened him, and that's when they did something incredibly brave. That was when he did something incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. He went to a journalist and tried to get the story into the newspaper. He was arrested at once. I was here in the laboratory, and they marched him away. They arrested your mother too. How old was I asked. You were 2, and I'm sorry, Yasha. They used you to get out to your parents. That was how they worked. It was very simple. If your parents didn't do what they were told, they would never see you again. What choice did they have? They were sent to Estrov to work in the factory. They were forced to produce the new anthrax. That was the deal. Stay silent and live. So everything, my parents' life or their non-life as prisoners in a remote village, the little house, the boredom and the poverty had been for me. I wasn't sure how that made me feel. Was I to blame for everything that had happened? Was I the one who destroyed their lives? Yasha. The man chief stood up and came over to me. He was much taller than I expected now. He was on his feet. He loomed over me. Were you inoculated? He asked. I nodded. My parents were shot at when they escaped, but they saw a syringe. They injected me. I knew your father had been working on an antidote. Thank God, but I guessed it was the moment I saw you. Otherwise, you had been dead a long time ago. My best friend died, I said. I'm so sorry. Anton and Eva, your parents, were my friends too. We fell silent. You were standing there, and a hand on the other chair. Well, what happened to me? I asked. You don't need to worry any more, Yasha. You'll be well looked after. Who was that you called? It was a friend, someone we can trust. He'll be here very soon. There was something wrong. Things that he told me didn't add up. I was about to speak when I heard the sound of sirens, police cars approaching. Still far away, but drawing nearer. Knew instantly that there was no friend. And Dementia had called them. It was in detective work. I could have asked him why my parents had been sent to live in Estrov while he'd been allowed to stay here. I could have played back the conversation he had on the telephone. Now he referred to me simply as the boy, not Yasha, not Anton's son, because the people at the other end knew I was. They expected me to show up, waiting for me. It could have worked out. I saw it all as a why. Why? I asked. He didn't even try to annoy me. I'm sorry, Yasha, he said, but nobody can know. We have to keep it secret. We, the factory managers, the helicopter pilots, the military, the government, and Dementia, they were all in it together. I scrambled to my feet, or tried to, but Dementia was ahead of me. He pounced down, his hands on my shoulders, using his weight to pin me to the seat. The moment his face was close to mine, hit the eyes staring at me through the thick. lenses. There's no way you can go, he hissed. I promise you they won't treat you badly. They'll kill me, I shouted back. They killed everyone. Talk to them, they'll take you somewhere safe. Yes, I saw a prison or a mental asylum, somewhere I'd never be seen again. Couldn't move. Dementia was too strong for me, and the police cars were getting closer. We were 24 floors up, but I could hear the sirens cutting through the air. Then I had an idea and forced myself to relax. You can't do this thing. My father gave me something for you. He said it was very valuable. He said if I gave it to you, you'd have to help me. What is it? I don't know. It's in the bag. It's in my pocket. Show me. It let go of my shoulders, but only one of them. I still couldn't wrench myself free. Sitting down, he stood over me and he was twice my size. Take it out, he said. The police must have returned into the main university drive. Here, car doors slammed shut. She went in one free arm and drew out the black bag my mother had given me. At least Dimmer and his friends had stolen it when they took my money. I placed it on the desk, and it worked just as I hoped. Dementia still didn't let go of me, but his grip loosened as he reached out and opened the bag. I saw his face change as he tiptoed out the contents. What? He began. I jerked myself free, throwing the chair backwards. As it toppled over, I managed to get to my feet. Dementia swung round, but he was too late. Suddenly lashing out with my fist, I knocked the glasses off his face. He fell back against the desk. Then he recovered and seized hold of me again. I needed a weapon. There was only one that I could see. I reached out and grabbed the arm of the skeleton, went to it free from the shoulder. The hand and the wrist dangled down, but I hung onto the upper bone, the humerus, and used it as a club, smashing it against Dementia's head. Again and again, until with a howl he fell back. I twisted away, Dementia crumpled over the desk. There was blood streaming down his face. Too late, he sounded. You won't get away. I snatched back the jewellery and tumbled out of the office. There was nobody outside. Surely someone must have heard what had happened. I didn't want to know. I ran to the lift. It was already on the way up, and it took me a few seconds to work out that the police were almost certainly inside, travelling towards me, and I might have been caught standing there waiting for them. Continued down the corridor and found a fire exit leading to 24 flights of stairs. I didn't stop until I reached the bottom. It was only then I realised I was still carrying the skeleton arms. I found a dustbin, picked up some newspapers and dropped the arm in. As I walked down the steps to the front door, I saw 3 police cars parked with their eyes flashing. I pretended to be immersed in the papers I had taken. If there were any policemen outside, it would look like one of the countless students coming in and out. But nobody stopped me. I hurried back to the station with just one thought in my head. I was alone in Moscow with no money. Chapter 8. Tverskaya. I went back to Kansasky station. In a way, it was my decision. The police knew I was in Moscow. They would certainly be watching all the major stations, just as they had in Rosno and Kursk. But I wasn't leaving. The truth was that in the whole of Russia, I had nowhere to go and no one to look after me. I couldn't go back to Russia, obviously. And although I remembered my mother once telling me that she had relations in a city called Kazan, I had no idea where it was or how to get there. No, it was much better to stay in Moscow. First of all, I would need to change my appearance. That was easy enough. I stripped off my pioneer uniform and dumped it in a bin. Then I got my hair cut short. Though the bulk of my money had gone, I managed to find 18 kopecks scattered through my pockets, and I used 9 of them at the barber shop. A dank little place in a back street with old hair strewn over the floor. As I stepped out again, feeling the unfamiliar cool over the breeze on my head and the back of my neck, a police car rushed past. But I wasn't worried. Even today, I was aware of how little you need to lose yourself in the city. A haircut, different clothes, perhaps a pair of sunglasses. It is enough. I still had enough kopecks for the return journey, and once I sat once again in the metro, tried to work out some sort of plan. The most immediate problem was accommodation. Where would I sleep when night came? If I stayed out on the street, I would be most vulnerable. Then there was the question of food. Without money, I couldn't eat. Of course, I could steal, but the one thing I most dreaded was falling back into the hands of police. If they recognized me, I was finished. And even if they didn't, I heard enough stories of prison camps all over Russia, built specially for children. Did I want to end up with the rest of my hair shaved off, stuck behind barbed wire in the middle of nowhere? There were thousands of Russian boys who lived exactly that. This time, I barely noticed the stations. No matter how superbly they were decorated, I was utterly miserable. My parents had believed in Mr. Dementia. They had sent me to him, even though it had cost them their lives. The moment I would walk into his office, he had thought only of saving his own skin. It seemed to me there was nobody in the world I could trust. Even Dimmer, the boy I had met when I got off the train, he would be interested in robbing me. But perhaps Dimmer was the answer. The more I thought about it, the more I decided he might not be bad after all. Funny when he had met. He had been pleasant enough, smiling and friendly, but he was simply setting me up for his friends. But maybe I was partly to blame for what had happened. Coming off the train and flashing my money all around at all the different stores. Dimmer was living on the street. He had to survive. I made myself an obvious target, and he'd done it, but he had to. At the time, I remember what he'd said to me. It's good to have a friend. You all need friends. It was possible that he actually meant it. He was, after all, only a few years older than me, and we were both in the same situation. Part of me knew that I was fooling myself. Dimmer was probably miles away now, laughing at me for being such a fool. But at the end of the day, he was the only person in the city I actually knew. If I could find him again, perhaps I could persuade him to help me. And then there was something else. I still had my mother's jewels. Half an hour later, I climbed up to the street level and found myself back where I had begun. The moon was still there at the food stalls, but they almost seemed to be taunting me. Before they had been welcoming, now all their pies and ice creams were beyond my reach. Found a bench and sat down, watching the crowds around me. Stations and strange places. When you pass through them, travelling somewhere, you barely notice them. They simply help you out. You're on your way. But standing outside with someone with nowhere to go, they make you feel worthless. You should not be here. They shout at you. If you're not a passenger, you do not belong here. So I did nothing at all. I just sat there staring at the traffic. Then people stream past me on all sides. Children I had seen were still dotted around. I wondered what they would do themselves when night fell. That could only be a few hours away. The light was barely changing. The sun trapped behind an unbroken cloud. There were already commuters arriving at the station on their way home. There was no sign of Dimmer. In the end, I went over to a couple of boys they're 10 years old. 10 years old I had seen before. Excuse me, I said. Two pairs of face-time malevolent eyes turned on me. One of the children had a snot running out of his nose. Both of them looked raw and healthy. I'm looking for someone I was talking to earlier. I went on. He was wearing a black leather jacket. His name is Dimmer. The boys glanced at each other. You got any money? One of them asked. No? Then get lost. Those weren't his actual words. Little boy whose voice hadn't even been broken. He was the filthiest language I ever heard. I saw that he had terrible teeth with gaps were half of them fallen out. His friend hissed at me like an animal. And at the moment the two of them weren't children at all. They were horrible old men, not even human. I was glad to leave them on their own. I tried to ask some of the other street kids the same question, but as I approached, they moved away. They all knew that I was from out of town. That I wasn't one of them, and from the reason that would have nothing to do with me. And now the light really was beginning to disappear. I was starting to feel the threat of nightfall. I couldn't stay here for much longer. I would have to find a doorway. Perhaps I could sleep in one subway beneath the streets. I had 4 kopecks left in my pocket, barely enough for a cup of hot tea. And then quite unexpectedly I saw him, Dimmer, with his oversized leather jacket and his handsome half-ugly face. He had turned the corner, smoking a cigarette, flicking away the match. There was another boy with him. I recognised him too. He'd be the one of the two who had robbed me. Then I said something, and they laughed. It looked as if they were heading for the metro, presumably on their way home. I didn't hesitate. It's now or ever. Across the concourse in front of the station, they stood in their path. Dimmer saw me first and stopped with the cigarette halfway to his lips, taking him by surprise. He thought I was going to be trouble. I could see at once he was tense and wary. I was completely relaxed. I'd already worked it out. He'd tricked me. He'd robbed me. But I had to treat him as my friend. Hi, Dimmer. I greeted him as if the three of us had arranged to meet here for coffee. He smiled a little, but he was still suspicious. There was something else. I wasn't quite sure what he was looking at me almost as he had expected. Come back, as if there was something he knew that I didn't. Soldier, he exclaimed. How are you doing? What happened to your hair? Got it cut. Did you meet your friend? No, he wasn't there. Seems he'd left Moscow. It's too bad. He nodded. In fact, I got a real problem. He was going to put me up but now I don't have anywhere to go. I was hoping he might offer to help. That was the idea anyway. Why not? He was 70 rubles richer than me. Thanks to him, I had nothing. He could at least offer me a bed for the night. But he didn't speak as I realized I was wasting my time. He was street-hardened, the sort of person that would have helped anyone in his life. The friend muttered something and pushed him past me, disappearing into the metro, but I stood my ground. Can you help me? I said. Just need someone to stay for a few nights. Then my last chance. I can pay you. You got money? Surprised him. He thought he'd taken it all already. Not anymore, I said. Shrugged as if to let him know that it didn't matter. Then I really would have forgotten about it. I've got this. I went on and put out a black velvet bag that my mother had given me that I'd used to trick Dementia. I opened it and poured the contents, the necklace, the ring and the earrings, into my hand. There must be a pawn shop somewhere. Sell them and then I can pay you for a room. Then I examined the jewellery, the brightly coloured stones and their silver and gold settings. And I could already see the light stirring in his eyes. As he made calculations how much they were worth and he was going to separate them from me, he dropped his cigarette and reached out and picked up one of the earrings. He won't let it out for his finger and thumb. This won't get you much, he said. It's cheap. Right then, I thought of my mother and I could feel the anger rising in my blood. I wanted to punch him, but I still forced to stay calm. I was told they were valuable, I said. That's gold and those stones are animals. Take me to a pawn shop and we can find out. I don't know. He was pretending otherwise, but he knew that the jewels were worth more than money that he had already stolen. Give me the stuff and I'll take you to a pawn broker for you. But I don't think you'll get more than 5 rubles. He'd get 50. I'd get 5. If I was lucky, I could see how much his mind was working. He held out my hand and reluctantly gave me the earring back. I can find a pawnbroker on my own. There's no need to be like that, soldier. I'm only trying to help. Gave me a crooked smile and made all the crooks by the broken nose. Listen, I've got a room, and you're welcome to stay with me. You know, we're all friends. We're in Moscow, right? But you have to pay rent. How much rent? 2 rubles a week. I pretend to consider. I'll have to see it first. Whatever you say, you can go there now if you like. Sure, why not? Take me back down to Metro. Even paid by fare again. Knew I was taking a risk. He could lead me to some faraway corner of the city, take me into an alleyway, put a knife into me, and steal jewelries. But I had a feeling that wasn't the way he worked. Dimmer was a hustler, a thief, but at the end of the day, he didn't seem to have the look of someone who was ready to kill. He would get the jewelry in the end anyway. I would pay to him as rent, as he would steal it from me while I slept. My plan was simply to make myself useful to him, to become part of his gang. If I could do this quickly enough, he might let me stray with him. Even I had nothing more to give, that was my hope. He took me up to place just off Tversky Street. So one of the main roads, the main thoroughfare. Thoroughfares in Moscow, which leads all the way down to the Kremlin and Red Square. Today there's a hotel at the same corner, the 9-story Marriott Grand, where American tourists can stay in total luxury. But when I came there following Dimmer, and still wondering if I wasn't making another bad mistake. It was very different. Moscow had changed so much, so quickly. It was another world back then. Dimmer lived in what had once been a block of flats, but which has long been abandoned and left to rot. All the colour had faded from the brickwork, which was damp and mouldy, covered with graffiti, not artwork, but political slogans, swear words, and names of city football teams. The windows were so dirty that they looked more like rusting metal than glass. The building rose up 12 floors, the 3 more than the hotel that would one day replace it. The whole thing seemed to be sagging in on itself, hardly bothering to stay upright. It was surrounded by other blocks that were similar. They looked like old men. Standing upright. They looked like old men standing out in the cold, having a last cigarette together before they died. The streets here were very narrow, more like alleyways, twisting together in the darkness. covered with rubbish and mud. The block of flats had shops on the ground floor, and chemistry, grocery store, a chemist, and a massage parlour, and a massage parlour. But the further up you went, the more desolate it became. It had no lifts, of course, just concrete staircase that had been used as a toilet so many times that it stank. By the time you got to the top, there was no electricity, no proper heating. The only water that came dribbling cold out of the taps. We climbed up together. I noticed that Dimmer was wheezing when we got to the top. I wondered if he was ill, although I could just have been all those cigarettes. In a way, we passed a couple of people, a man and a woman lying on top of each other, unconscious. I couldn't even be sure they were actually alive. Dimmer just stepped over them, and I did the same. Over them, and I did. I couldn't. We just passed a couple of people, a man and a woman lying on top of each other, unconscious. I couldn't even be sure they were actually alive. Dimmer just stepped over them, and I did the same. I wondered what I was getting myself into. It should be a place of poverty and hardship, but it was somewhere more shocking here in the middle of the city. Dimmer's room was on the 8th floor. Since there was no lighting, he had taken out a torch and used it to find his way. He went down a corridor that was missing its carpet with gaping holes showing the pipework and wiring. There were doors on either side, most of them blocked, one or two reinforced with metal plating. Somewhere I could hear a baby crying. A man shouted out a swear word. Another laughed. The sounds that echoed around me were only added to the nightmare senses that I had been sucked into a dark and alien world. This is me, Dimmer said. We'd come to a door marked number 83. Somebody had added Dimmer's place in bright red letters, but the paint hadn't been allowed to dry. It had trickled down like blood. Perhaps the effect was deliberate. There was a hole where the lock should have been, but Dimmer used a padlock and a chain to keep the place secure. And at that moment, it was hanging open. His friends had arrived ahead of us. "Welcome home," he said to me. "This is my place. Come in and meet my mates." He pushed the door open. He went in. The flat was tiny. Most of it was a single room, which he said shared with two boys who had robbed me. On the floor were 3 mattresses and some filthy pillows. The carpet, which was mouldy and colourless. The place was lit by candles. And my first thought was that if one of them toppled over in the night, we would all burn to death. The place was lit by candles. And my first thought was that if one of them toppled over in the night, we would all burn to death. A single table and 4 chairs stood on one side. Otherwise, there was no furniture, only description. A few bits of the kitchen were still in place, but I could tell at a glance that the sink hadn't been used for years. And without electricity, the fridge was no more than an oversized cupboard. The smell in the room was unpleasant. A mixture of human sweat, unwashed clothes, dirt and decay. Dimmer waved me over to the table. "This is Yasha," he announced. "He's going to be staying with us for a while." His 2 friends were already sitting there playing Snap with a deck that was so worn the cards hung limp in their hands. They didn't look pleased as I joined them. "He's going to pay," Dimmer added, 2 rubles a week. Dimmer opened the fridge and took out a bottle of vodka, some black bread. He took some dirty glasses in the sink and poured drinks for us all. He lit a cigarette for himself, then offered me one, which I accepted gratefully. It wasn't a debt I just wanted to smoke. It was a gesture of friendship. That was what I most needed. Dimmer introduced the two boys. "This is Roman. That's Gregory." Roman was tall and thin. He looked as if he had been deliberately stretched. Gregory was round-faced, pock-marked with oily black hair. All 3 of them looked not just adult but old, so they had forgotten their true age, which was about 17. Roman collected the cards and put them away. It was obvious who was the leader here. So long as Dimmer said I could stay, they weren't going to argue. "Tell us about yourself, soldier," Dimmer said. "I'd like to know what brought you to Moscow." He winked at me, and I'd particularly like to know why the police are so interested in you. "What? So I'd been right. When I got back to the station, I thought the children had been behaving strangely. I knew why. The police had been there, looking for me." "That's right. Tell him, Gregory said nothing. So Dimmer went on. They're looking for someone new in town. Someone who must have come into Kanzansky Station, dressed up like a young pioneer. They've been asking everyone. He tapped Ash. He was offering a reward for information. My heart sank. I wondered if he had walked into another trap. Dimmer invited me to tell me a rest, but there was no sound coming from the outside. No footsteps in the corridor. No one's silence in the street. Don't worry, soldiers. No one's going to turn you in. Not even for the money. They never pay up anyway. I hate the police. Police. Roman had a stutter. I watched his face contort as he tried to spit out the last word. What do they want with you? We asked. He sounded hostile. He was afraid that I was bringing more trouble. Into his life. He probably had enough already. I wasn't sure how to answer. I didn't want to lie, but I was afraid of telling the truth. In the end, I kept as short as I could. They killed my parents, I said. My dad knew something he wasn't meant to know. They wanted to kill me too. I escaped. What about your friend at the university? Dimmer said. He wasn't my friend. I was on safer ground here. Told him everything that had happened to Dementia's office. When I described how I had beaten Dementia off using the arm of the skeleton, Dimmer laughed out loud. I wish I had seen that, he said. You certainly gave him the elbow. It was a weak joke, but we all laughed. Dimmer refilled our glasses. And once again we drank the Russian way, throwing the liquid back in a single gulp. It didn't take us long to finish the bottle, and about an hour later we all went to bed. If you called bed a square of carpet with a pile of old clothes as a pillow, I was just glad to have a roof over my head and help by the vodka. I was asleep almost at once. The next morning Dimmer took me to the pawnbroker. He had mentioned it was a tiny shop with a cracked front window and an old half-shaven man sitting behind a counter that was stacked with watches and jewellery. I handed across my mother's earrings and stood there, watching him examine them briefly through an eyeglass which he screwed into his vodka. I was asleep almost at once. The next morning Dimmer took me to the pawnbroker. He had mentioned it was a tiny shop with a cracked front window and an old half-shaven man sitting behind a counter that was stacked with watches and jewellery. I handed across my mother's earrings and stood there, watching him examine them briefly through an eyeglass which he screwed into his face, as if he was part of him. Why then, a little part of me died. He had been a pawnbroker that a hero had murdered in Crime and Punishment. The boy had been near school. I could almost have done the same. I wanted to give him my 8 rubles for the earrings, but Dimmer talked him up to 12. The two of them knew each other well. You're a crook, Resnick, Dimmer scowled. You're a thief, Dimmer, Resnick replied. One day someone will stick a knife in you. I don't mind, so long as they buy it from me first. Dimmer took the money and we went back out into the sunlight. He gave me 3 rubles, keeping 9 for himself. When I looked down reproachfully at the crumbled notes, he clapped me on the back. That's 3 weeks' rent, soldier, he said. What about the other 3 rubles? That's my commission. If you hadn't had me with you, that old crook would have ripped you off. I'd been ripped off anyway, but I didn't complain. Dimmer had said I would stay with him for 3 weeks. It's exactly what I wanted to hear. Let's get some breakfast, he said. We had breakfast in the smallest, grimiest restaurant it would be possible to imagine. Somehow I ended up paying for that too. So I began my stay in Moscow. I adapted very quickly to the way of life. The truth is that nobody did anything very much. They stole, they ate, they survived. I spent long hours out inside the station with Dimmer, Roman and Grigory. The 2 boys didn't warm to me, but gradually they became accepted that I was there. At the same time, Dimmer had made a special project. I wondered if he might have a younger brother at some time, but he never spoke about his past life. But that was how he treated me. When I write about him now, I will see him with the sleeve of his precious leather jacket falling over his hands. He smiled the way he swaggered along, and I wonder if he is alive or dead. Dead, but most probably. Homeless kids in Moscow had never survived a long time. Dimmer taught me how to beg. You be careful because if the police saw you, they would pick you up and throw you into jail. My fair hair and the fact that I looked so young helped. If I stood outside the Bolshoi theatre at night, I could earn as much as 5 rubles from the rich people coming out. The tourists in the Red Square, and I would position myself outside St. Basil's Cathedral with its towers and twisting, multicoloured domes. I didn't have to speak. Once an American gave me $5, which I passed on to Dimmer. He gave me 50 kopecks back, but that was his own special exchange rate. I knew it was worth a lot. I got used to the city. Streets that had seemed huge and threatening became familiar. I could find my way around on the metro. I visited Lenin, lying dead in his tomb, although Dimmer told me that most of his body was made of wax. I also saw the grave of Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space. Not that it meant anything to me now. I went to the big shops, Glum department store, and Yeltsev's food hall, and stayed at all the amazing food I would never be able to afford. Just once I visited a bathhouse in Bolshoi and enjoyed the total luxury of sitting in the steam, breathing in the scent of anchor leaves and feeling warm and clean. And I stole. We needed to buy food, cigarettes, and most importantly, vodka. It seemed that it was impossible to live in Tverenska without alcohol, and every night there was terrible arguments when someone's bottle was finished. We would hear the screams and the knife fights, and the next day there would often be fresh blood on the stairs. Those who couldn't afford vodka got high on shoe polish. I'm not lying, they would spread it on bread and place it on a hot pipe, then breathe in the fumes. No matter how much time I spent begging, we never had enough money. And I wasn't surprised to find myself back at Resnick's, the pawn shops. With Dim's help, I got 15 rubles from my mother's necklace, more than the earrings, but less than I'd hoped. I was determined to not to part with her ring. It's the only memory of her that I had left. So inevitably I turned to crime. One of Dimmer's favourite trips was to hang around outside an expensive shop watching as the customers came out with their groceries, and he would wait when they loaded their car. Then either Romeo or Gregory would distract them, while he snatched as much as he could out of the boot and ran for it. I watched the operation a couple of times before Dimmer let me play part of the decoy. Because I was so much younger than the other two boys, probably was more sympathetic. I was less suspicious. I would go up to them and pretend to be lost while Dimmer sneaked up to the back of their car. First 3 times it worked perfectly, and we found ourselves eating all sorts of things that we never tasted before. Roman and Gregory were used to me now. We began playing cards together, a game the Russians know called Durek or Fool. They'd even found a mattress for me. It was a lot softer than the floor, and it was infested with insects, but I still appreciated the gesture. Fourth time, however, was almost a disaster, and it changed everything. It was the usual setup. We were outside a shop in a quiet street. It was nowhere we hadn't been to before. Our target was Chaffor. I used to work for some big businessman who avoided to entertain. His car was a Daimler, and there were enough food in the back to keep us going for a month. As usual, I went up to the man and looking as careful as possible, trying to engage him to conversation. "Can you help me? I'm looking for Pushkin Square." At the corner of my eye, I saw Dimmer scurry up to the pavement, disappear behind the resin door of the boot. Trevor glared at me. "Get lost." "I am lost. I need to get to Pushkin Square. All I had to do was keep up the conversation for about 30 seconds, and at that time Dimmer would have gone. 2 or 3 bags would have gone with him. Suddenly I heard him cry out, and I saw him with complete horror that a policeman had appeared out of nowhere. To this day I don't know where he had come from, because we checked the immediate area first. I can only assume that he'd been expecting us, that the police must have decided to crack down on this sort of street theft, and that he had been lying in wait all along. He was a huge man with the neck and the shoulders of a professional weightlifter. Dimmer was squirming in his jacket, but he was a fish caught in a net. I saw Chaffor making a grab from me, but I ducked under his arms, ran round the back of the car. There was nothing I could do for Dimmer. The only simple thing was to run away and leave him, and just be thankful I had had a lucky escape. I couldn't do it. Despite everything, I was grateful to him, And that was at least for 6 weeks now he had protected me. He wouldn't have survived without it. I owed him something. I threw myself at the policeman, who reacted as in astonishment. I honestly left less than half his size. I barely knocked him off balance. He didn't let go of Dimmer. If anything, he tightened his grip, blowing at the chauffeur to come and join in. Dimmer lashed out with a fist, but the policeman didn't feel it. With his spare hand, he grabbed hold of my shirt so that we both held captive. And seeing us unarmed and helpless, the chauffeur lumbered forward to help. He would certainly have been taken prisoner. That would have been the end of my Moscow adventure. Indeed, if I were recognised, it might be the end of my life. But as I struggled, I saw the other one of the shopping bags had fallen over, spilling out its contents. A plastic bag with red powder on the top. Snatched it up, split it open, hurled it into the policeman's face, all in a single movement. It was chili powder. The policeman was instantly blinded and howled in pain, both hands rushing to cover his eyes. Dimmer was forgotten. In fact, everything was forgotten. The policeman's head was covered in red powder. He was spinning round his feet. I grabbed Dimmer and two of us began to run. The same moment a police car appeared at the far end of the street, speeding towards us. Its lights blazing. We ran across the pavement and down to another alley between two shops. It was a cul-de-sac, block at the front wall. But we didn't let it stop us, not for a second. We simply sprinted up the brickwork and over the top, crashing down onto an assortment of dustbin and cardboard boxes on the other side. Dimmer rolled over, then got on his feet. He began to hear the siren behind us and knew that the policemen were only seconds away. We kept running down another alleyway and across a main road with 6 lanes of traffic and cars, trucks, motorbikes and buses bearing down on from every direction. It's a miracle we weren't killed. As there was, one car swerved out of the way and there was a screech and crumbling of metal. As there was a screech and some crumbling of metal as a second car crashed into it. We didn't slow down. We didn't look back. We must have run half a mile across Moscow, ducking into side roads, chasing behind buildings, doing everything we could to keep out of sight. Eventually we came to a metro entrance, darted into it, disappearing underground. There was a train waiting at the platforms. We didn't care where it was going. We dived in and sank exhausted into the 2 seats. Neither of us spoke again until we had got back to our own station and climbed back to one familiar street. We didn't go to the flat straight away. Dimmer took me to a coffee house and we bought a couple of glasses of kvass, a sweet, watery drink made from bread. We sat next to it to the window. We both were still out of breath. I could hear Dimmer's lungs rattling. Climbing the stairs was enough for exercise for him. He had just run a marathon. "Thank you, soldier," he said eventually. "You were unlucky," I said. "I was lucky you were there. You could have just left me." "Not saying anything. Hate this stupid city," Dimmer said. "I never wanted to come here." "Why did you?" "I don't know." He shrugged and pointed to his broken nose. "My dad did this to me when I was 6 years old. He threw me out when I was 7. I ended up in an orphanage in Yaroslav, and that was a horrible place. Horrible. You don't want to know." He took out a cigarette and lit it. They used to tie the kids down to their beds, the troublemakers they left there, until they were covered in their own dirt. And the noise, the scream and the crying, never stopped. I think half of them were mad. Were you adopted? Well, I asked. Nobody wanted me, not the way I looked. I ran away, got out of Yaroslav, and ended up on a train to Moscow, just like you. I was like, "There's something I want to know," he said. "First day we met at Kansarsky station. Took a drag on a cigarette and I sailed blue smoke. We took your money. It was Roman Grigg and me. We set you up." "I know," I said. He looked at me, thought must, but now I'm admitting it, okay? "Thought you must have, but now I'm admitting it, okay? Doesn't matter," I went on. "I'd have done the same. I have done the same." "Don't think so, soldier. You're not the same as us." "I like being with you," I said. "And there's something I want to ask." "Go ahead." Do you mind not calling me soldier?" "No, whatever you say, Yasha." He patted me on the shoulder. We finished our drinks, stood up and went home, and it seemed to me that I had actually done what I set out to do today. The 2 of us were friends. Goodbye, everyone, and thank you for listening to me reading you that.